Tasmania here, southern state at the bottom of Australia, and I've been invited to chat to you on this ADAPT program. It's a great honour. Thanks, guys, for asking me. And I suppose you're wondering why I'm talking to you today. Look, I'm an orthopaedic surgeon in Launceston, Tasmania. You're all welcome to come down here and have a chat some point in time. We have a lovely place to stay. But that's an invitation to the state rather than just my house. I'm in a strange situation of trying to talk about nutrition and what it can mean for everyone's life and advising that to my patients. Yet our Australian Medical Board, in their investigation and wisdom, have found that what I'm talking about is probably a bit too controversial and decided to encourage me not to talk about it. So as a result of that, I found that I cannot officially speak to you, but I'm going to continue to do it because, as many of you know, nutrition plays a really central role in our health. And once you see the benefits of low carbohydrate, healthy fat living for yourself, for your family, and for me, for my patients, I cannot unsee the results. So I'm talking about it in my community. I'm also talking about it internationally. Why is it so important to me? Well, it's important in my practice because I see the problems of obesity, the problems of lifestyle-related disease, and I see this is totally out of control. Most of my patients are overweight or obese, and that's a simple fact. 2/3 of the population now have that problem and that issue. So that's in fact the majority. So the minority of people are now normal weight. So when you actually consider that, we've got 2/3 of the population, doesn't matter which country you're in, it's pretty well worldwide, that are in fact going to be succumbing to the problems of lifestyle-related disease. Now, whether or not from my aspect it's their joints and their limbs, and particularly with diabetes, and in northern Tasmania, I see patients with diabetes-related foot complications every week, and it's devastating. It's devastating for them. It's massive family cost. It's got a follow-on problem with the community cost, and our health systems can completely overrun with diabetes-related complications. And in my mind, low carbohydrate living means that all of those complications are completely and utterly reversible. And, well, actually not reversible once you've gotten them, but they're completely and utterly avoidable. And here we've got something which is affecting so much of the population, and it's going to be an increasing amount. And we've got something which is preventable, avoidable, preventable, avoidable. I keep saying that because the complications of diabetes are related to excess blood glucose, which gets into the tissues. And the major cause of that excess blood glucose getting into the tissues is what we eat. And if we avoid it, if we avoid that and replace it with other energy-dense, nutrient-dense food, then you're actually going to avoid those complications over time. And it's got massive implications both in the short and the long term. But rather than just talk about that aspect today, I've been dwelling about our general health, and it doesn't come down to just nutrition. And so I want to talk to you about the 6 pillars of health. To me, just looking at nutrition isn't just enough. So to me, nutrition is the first pillar of health, and I'm going to actually start with that and I'll come back to it. So we've got nutrition, and if you put the right fuel in your tank, you're actually going to be healthier. That's a simple thing. None of us run our cars with the wrong petrol. You know, we don't put petrol in with our diesel, we don't put diesel in with our petrol. A little bit won't hurt. That's one of those great myths of all time. A little bit over a long period of time causes a lot of troubles. The next pillar of health, so the first one is nutrition. Now, next one is exercise. The next one after that is sleep. The next one after that is stress management. The next one is communication, and the final one is our genetics. So the other 6 pillars, and if you get all 6 pillars right, then you're going to be set. So we need to get our nutrition right, we need to get our exercise right, we need to be sleeping well, we need to be managing stress, we need to be communicating with others, and then our genetics. Now, we're going to go backwards through that list. So genetics, there's not a lot you can do about it. You know, that's the environment you were born into from your parents. They gave you that genetic material. But there's more and more work being done to say, okay, you've got that genetic predisposition to a disease, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to get that. And you've got some control over that, and you've certainly got some aspects which you have no control over. However, don't think that nutrition doesn't have a role to play in how you express your genetic potential. I really think that communication's got a central role to play in our health. And if you're isolated either, without any support, whether or not it's family or whether or not it's in the workplace or in your community, then you're actually prone to disease. So the fact that we are communicating in different ways now is in fact a really important thing to consider. And there's a whole lot of science behind social media and actually what it does. And dopamine, oxytocin, we actually get feel-good messages from that, but we also get the converse. We can actually feel very depressed, very anxious by our situation within social media. But nonetheless, I think that communication gives us strength, and certainly from my aspect, rather than being isolated in a place called Tasmania and trying to get a message out to the world about nutrition, I not only communicate with my wife, my family, my immediate community, but in a medium such as what we're doing now, I'm reaching out to goodness knows how many people who are actually interested in making a difference. So just knowing that we're actually getting a message out there and communicating actually gives a lot of strength, and I think that's actually an integral part of health. So people have criticisms of social media, and they have criticism of the fact that we actually communicate in sound bites of information now, but in fact we're actually communicating far more than we ever have. So all that traffic out there is actually increasing the community consciousness. It's our world consciousness is well and truly out there in an uncontrolled fashion. And I like that chaotic state because information has been sent to us and controlled to us for centuries. Whether or not it's come through the church and whether or not it's come through the printed press and the books that were originally controlled by small numbers of people, and then by the newspapers, and then we've got the television and radio. But now all of a sudden, in this very, very modern era, a message can actually be translated right across the world very, very quickly. That concept is, I think the world's no longer round again. I think it's actually flat. I mean, I'm communicating right this second with people on the other side of the world. So it's morning here in Tasmania on Saturday morning, and it's I know it's evening in New York. So it's the world's gone flat again. We've actually got this communication pathway right around the planet, and I am inspired by that because we're actually that's giving us strength. And certainly in this message, where I'm promoting getting away from processed food, we're up against some big dollars, and those dollars have the money to advertise, and we can do this on a budget. Here I am in my study here. It gets a bit messy, and it's part of the chaos theory in itself. So communication, personal, family, and then out to the community is just central to our health. Stress, that's another pillar of health, and that really, really is a struggle for the majority of people on the planet. Anybody who says they're not stressed is lying. We've got so much pressure on us with work, income, looking after life, planning for your financial retirement, all of those sorts of things are added pressures. There's so much problems associated with that, in that stress is manifested to us in a whole lot of ways. But unfortunately, when we are stressed, we produce a hormone called cortisol, and that controls so much of our of the effect on our bodies that's the problem we actually find with our health. So if you produce too much cortisol, an extreme form of that's something called Cushing syndrome, or another form is when people take too much in the way of oral corticosteroids. So you've seen those problems of people who have too much steroid on their body. Now, that same pressure can be put on us by ourselves, by our bodies producing too much cortisol. Now, if you produce too much cortisol, you're going to struggle with your health, you're going to struggle with your weight. And I think a lot of people who are actually trying to lose weight and trying to do it just by nutrition are going to struggle because they're producing too much cortisol. How can you control stress? Well, I don't think it's an easy. There's no simple one-step answer here. For me, stress management is about not taking it all on yourself. And I think it's about sharing stress. You cannot just take stress and expect to get through it by yourself. I'm very fortunate. I've got a very loving wife, Belinda, and many of you will know that she's taken over one of my social media platforms. So it was Gary Fetke, no fructose on Facebook. It's now Belinda Fetke, no fructose. So, go and join her because she's actually, half of my stress management team. I think sharing it with family is important. We are a family unit. We've got 3 children. We've got their spouses, and we've got a grandchild on the way. So, this is all about us as a family, and we actually sit down at regular intervals and explain it to the kids what's happening, and they've got our back. They support us. Now, that's the way we manage stress, and that in itself is that's our method. It's not everyone's method. We also live on a farm. That is fabulous. Every time I get stressed, it's nothing for me to go out and walk out barefoot in the paddock, go down to the chooks, see what they're doing. Again, it's not available to everyone, but the opportunity of sharing your stress is actually pretty critical. And if you can control that to a degree, okay, great. That's going to be good for your health. But also understand that what's stressful today may not be stressful tomorrow. And I said to one of our kids just recently who had some issues going on, I said, look, the treatment of stress here, the best way of managing is to actually say, put one foot in front of the other and then repeat. I go, it's pretty simple. Just put one foot in front of the other and then repeat. 17 years ago, I had a tumour on my pituitary, and it was a pretty stressful time, not just for me, the family. It was a career issue. I had to stop working for some months. I needed to learn to walk again. And so that whole concept to put one foot in front of the other, repeat, has actually been critical for my own survival, my own stress management, my own family. And, when things get tough, we just keep doing what you do. And guess what? Things improve, Another great quote I heard recently is, if it's everything will be all right in the end. And if it's not all right, then it's not the end. And we live by that because there are lots of wins on a day-to-day basis, and focus on the small things, focus on that one step after another. That's stress management for me. If it works for others, fabulous. But I think that's critical for your health. And if you're totally stressed out, your cortisol levels are up, your ability to help yourself, your health, lose weight, all of that's going to be a struggle. Sleep is another one of those pillars of health. And, what the number is varies from individual to individual. We're supposed to get a good amount of sleep. It's really, really important. I am the greatest hypocrite of that. So, okay, don't listen to me and don't listen to ourselves about how to get kids to sleep, because we stuffed that up completely. So we've 2 sleep-deprived parents for a couple of decades, and we're still not very good at it. But I understand that if you need the sleep, it's going to be integral to your health. What's my message? Don't worry about having a little nano nap. Having a nap in the middle of the day. Do that from time to time, and probably once a week. Have an early night. Get to bed early. Let your body listen to your body. And I know that's easy to say. And if you've got stress and you've got work, and particularly if you've got shift work, you're really going to struggle with that. And again, that stress associated with shift work, cortisol levels, completely stuffed up. I know that's a big issue for a lot of shift workers and their health. So can you do anything about that? Well, not a lot, but the first thing is you can actually think about it and practice. The next pillar of health, and we're coming backwards, we've got exercise and nutrition to come back to. If we think about exercise, it's almost like nutrition. There's so much confusion out there about what's good exercise. How much should you do? Should you be doing this or that, or should you be going to the gym? I think 2 things about exercise and sport in particular is that think about the history of exercise. So prior to 1950, the indications for exercise and sport were, number 1, to go off to war, to get stronger and fitter than the other guy. The next one was for our mental health, and I think we should focus on that, actually interacting with people, doing stuff, getting out in the environment, getting outside, breathing the air, is actually a really important part of our health. The next indication for exercise in the 1950s, or before 1950, was actually to increase our libido. So therefore to increase our sex drive. It was actually prescribed to actually do that. And one of the other major reasons for exercise before 1950 was actually to get us to put on weight. So we were encouraged to actually put on weight rather than to lose weight. And it wasn't until the 1970s and 1980s in Australia we had the the Begin It program, which was to get everyone actually off their backsides and exercising to lose weight. In fact, but that's actually a concept which we've gotten completely flawed. It's another one of these myths. Exercising to lose weight doesn't actually work. Exercising for your mental health is good, and it decreases your stress levels. So how much exercise should you get to do? Well, again, I think that's a bit on time constraints. There's been a lot of literature say, go walking for 30 minutes a day. That's really critical for your health. Get your heart pumping. Then there's another side of it which actually says, get out there and actually just do short bursts of intensive energy and to get sweating, get your pulse rate well and truly up, and then do that. I don't know the right answer. I'm an orthopaedic surgeon. I've been looking at this for the last 30 years. There's so much mixed literature out there. What I think you should be doing is you should be exercising for your mental health. You should be doing something. What do I do? Well, I'm time poor. So, I'm all about doing core strength, and I'm doing that short burst stuff. I'd love to be out there walking every day and spending half an hour doing it. My wife does that a few times a week, and each weekend we try and actually do a bit of walking. So I'm mixing it up a bit. But on a day-to-day basis, I do some core strength work. I do some intensive exercise, and that only takes me 10 minutes. And I can fit that into my schedule. But let's mix it up a bit. Is there a right or wrong answer? Just get out and do it. See what you can fit into your life, fit into what's happening with your aches and pains and your joints and your arthritis. But doing something is actually critical. As to what? I don't know the answer. So look, ultimately this nutrition is a magic, that's the magic thing. Nutrition is the one pillar of health that you can do something about today. The other 5 you can't. You can't do much about your genetics. You can try and increase your communication, but that's a two-way street. You can try and improve how you manage stress. You can try and improve your sleep. You can try and increase your exercise. But what you can do with your nutrition, you can actually change that straight away. And with the right information, I think you can make some personal choices and actually help your overall scenario. There's no question, as I said right at the beginning, getting the right fuel in your tank is the critical answer. Now, if you actually put that in over a long period of time, and I call that investing in your health. Many of us invest in our financial retirement, but very few people concentrate on their health retirement. So just like your financial retirement, if you put the right amount of money in over a long period of time, chances are it will compound interest and you'll have a secure financial retirement. But if you think about it from health retirement, if you do the same thing over a long, long period of time, you're likely to have a better health outcome. Sure, you maybe have a financial crisis, you may be hit by a truck, and it's all going to no avail. But in principle, you're generally going to be better off if you plan for that health retirement. And if you also plan for a bad health retirement by smoking regularly, eating badly, junk food, not exercising, then chances are you're going to be in a poorer health outcome at that retirement. There's going to be always stories of someone who smokes all their way through their life and eats badly and then lives to 150 years of age. I mean, all that sort of stuff you'll hear, and it'll be out. But again, you put your money in a sound investment. The same thing goes with your health. Now, if you think about our nutrition over the last 40 years, and there's been a lot of talk about this, the advice we've been giving to people doesn't work on the whole because 2/3 of the population now are overweight or obese and suffering lifestyle-related disease. So I used to get cranky at fat people. I myself, I've dropped 23 kilos. I'm a lot healthier now than I was 10 years ago. So, I read something recently, don't trust anybody who's talking about health who hasn't lost at least 10 kilograms. Well, I've dropped 23 kilos. It's staying off. I'm much healthier. And I've been able to keep it off for for several years now. What's been my secret? Well, it's been an ongoing education. I was a fat kid. I've been struggling with my weight for 45 years. And so I've been learning for that period of time. What have I learnt? Well, I've learnt that if you eat by the food pyramid, then you're going to ultimately die by the food pyramid. That advice has been, I think, poor. And unfortunately, along the way, most of it's going to look like the food pyramid. So, they're going to get that triangular shape. And you've only got to look down the street to see, unfortunately, that's what most of us have been doing. We've been following the advice, whether or not we've been actively or passively doing it. We are struggling as a society to look after our health. So what does that mean? Well, I've challenged that over time, and I've started to look at the myths associated with it. And when you actually start looking at nutritional, I call it science, because you find out that it's actually a house of cards. And the more you actually question it, the more you say, where did that guideline come from? Where did that piece of information come? How did that become part of my mental capacity? How did that become what we call the paradigm? And then you've got to find everyone's defending the paradigm. And then you've got institutions defending it, and then you've got commercial interests defending it. But unfortunately, it's a huge house of cards. Now, something I looked at recently was, in fact, the American Heart Association guidelines for sugar intake. Now, that's very current. And if I wanted to think about it just a little bit differently, so the American Heart Association guidelines sort of say adults should restrict their sugar intake to about 10 teaspoons a day, which is not dissimilar to where the World Health Organization sit. They talk about children's sugar intake, and it should be about 5 to 6 teaspoons of sugar per day. And then they then they state very clearly, under the age of 2, there's no role for added sugar intake. Okay? So between our precious babies, at their critical time of growth, when their brain development, body development, rapid period of time, their most susceptible time, we have decreed as the American Heart Association, and pretty well in agreement with other bodies, that sugar is harmful for babies from 0 to 2. I'm going to repeat that. Sugar is harmful from babies from 0 to 2. So what happened at age 2 years and 1 day that sugar was okay to... why introduce a poison on their second birthday, give them a big cake, and as a result of that, it's then safe for the rest of life, in moderation, whatever that means. And if you just think about, what sugar does to kids at a party, first of all, they go crazy, and then a few hours later, they're cranky and depressed. So if we introduce, just for the sake of it, sugar at the age of 2 and start putting a little bit more processed food into the environment, they're well and truly off the breastfeeding, processed foods coming into the equation, could that possibly be part of the explanation of the terrible 2s, the tantrums that start coming in? Just a theory, can't prove it. Someone out there, please take it on board. Let's think about the fat guidelines as well. Now, I'm not giving you specific nutritional advice today. I'm just looking at guidelines. The Australian dietary guidelines with fat consumption say that do not restrict fat and saturated fat intake for children from 0 to 2 because it's critical for their brain development and their health development. Again, that really critical time when we're actually supposed to be, in our growth period. And again, the same dietary guidelines say do not restrict fat intake for those that are elderly and infirm. So I struggle with this concept that the Australian dietary guidelines, and again they mimic right around the world, that from 0 to 2 it's critical that a baby has that fat in their diet. And our elderly and infirm, our most fragile end of the spectrum, they need to have fat in their healthy intake. But between 2 and 70, it's incredibly dangerous. So I get myself into trouble by pointing out these guidelines are flawed. The same thing goes with hospital food, which is really, where I probably have gotten myself into most of the trouble. Hospitals really should be pillars of health. They really should be the first spot where we actually set the example for the community. And at the moment, our hospital food, I believe, over a long period of time, is contributing to our health outcomes because we're setting the wrong example in the community. And I got into trouble because I actually gave a talk, and which was went to the hospital food industry, put it on social media, and it was called "Hospital Food is Crap and It's Killing My Patients." And excuse the expletive, but over time, if you actually set the wrong example in the hospital, then you're setting the wrong example in the community, and then you are actually slowly but surely potentially causing troubles. And I think that's a bad, we've got to set the example right. Now, I've been criticised by the medical board because they actually said that there's actually been no cases of my patients being killed by hospital food in the hospital. So I'm getting judged on what people extrapolate and take me literally when in fact hospital food is crap and it's killing my patients. And it's killing, I think, by setting the wrong example. Some of you may be, not surprised when they walk into the hospital and they see junk food for sale. We've got Coca-Cola, we've got soft drink, we've got lollies, all there as treats. And treats to me are just actually another example of a moment of substance abuse in some respects, and it's a bit extreme, but nonetheless, we're actually after our little chemical hit, we're after our high, we're after our sugar hit. But the hospital kiosks and the hospitals actually can do better. So I've been campaigning that we need to get soft drinks and sugar-sweetened beverages out of the hospitals and set a better example. I've been doing that for about 5 or 6 years and keep coming up against brick walls. And I'm delighted to see that New Zealand hospitals have largely taken them out. In Australia, we've got the Alfred Hospital in Melbourne's done the same thing, Riverina Hospitals, Barwon Heads Hospitals. There are other hospitals, not in Tasmania, who are actually taking on this, proactive, preventative aspect to health. And I'd love to see it happen in Tasmania, and one day we'll play catch up. But along the way, the message is getting out there to these other communities. Another thing about hospital food is that in Australia, we follow guidelines which are predominantly from New South Wales and Victoria, and in those guidelines they recommend that patients with diabetes have 2 to 3 desserts per day. Now, does that make sense to anyone? I mean, you've got someone with unstable blood sugars who are in hospital generally because they've got some complication of their unstable diabetes that are then given, when they're in a hospital environment, sugar 2 to 3 times a day as a dessert. And that's in fact condoning the fact. No wonder patients come to me saying, I'm confused. I came to hospital and they keep serving me desserts, ice cream, chocolate muffins, and soft drink, cordial, and fruit juice. It is any wonder that everyone is confused about what's the right nutritional advice. So here we've got government authorities, we've got bureaucracies, we've got hospitals actually giving mixed messages. Sugar's dangerous for 0 to 2, fat's safe from 0 to 2, but then after that, sugar's safe and fat's dangerous. I mean, we've got hospitals feeding desserts and cakes to patients with diabetes. Is it any wonder that the person on the street is confused? Then you take the media into it. The media have got no interest in actually giving a concerted campaign saying the majority of stuff is right. Now in Australia, I've been trying to build bridges between different factions in this concept, and the CSIRO have come up with a low-carb cookbook at this point in time. That's the best-selling non-fiction book in Australia at the moment, and the low-carb cookbook for diabetes is actually a huge success for them. Interestingly, the author of that book, CSIRO book, was in our lounge room a couple of years ago, and we were having a good chat about how you would actually implement low-carb in society. And good luck to Penny and the team. They've got the cookbook out there, but here I am getting criticised for talking about it, yet I was involved in certainly discussions around that a couple of years ago. Where the other bridges we're trying to build is that, if we talk about low-carb healthy fat, if we talk about paleo, we talk about CSIRO diets, we talk even about some of the guidelines. 90% of what we're talking about is pretty well the same, which is just eat real food. And the press and the media don't want us to all come out there and say the same thing, because all of a sudden, there's no controversy, there's no sales. So what happens with someone like Chef Pete Evans about paleo? Rather than the press coming out and saying, look, Pete Evans is promoting the fact that we should be eating real food and getting back to eating the basics and spending time in community and family. Rather than that, they focus on fringe stuff. And the same thing with myself. They say, okay, he's talking about that people need to eat butter. Well, in fact, I'm talking about it's not extreme stuff that I'm talking about. If we all focus on 90% of the same stuff, and some of you are going to be low carbers, some of you are going to be high fatters, we're all trying to tweak it for our individual aspect. And 90% of what I'm saying is the 90% of what most people are saying. Let's get back to eating real food. What this actually means is that concept, JERF, just eating real food, to me is my explanation of that is that we need to eat food which is fresh, local, and seasonal. Now, by definition, when you define food that is fresh, local, and seasonal, then that equals low-carb, healthy fat. Because the natural sources of sugar are fruit. And fruit is only available at the end of summer, beginning of autumn. And in the animal kingdom, we deliberately eat that food and stuff it in as much as we can. It drives behaviour. Sugar in that food is part of drives behaviour. And we turn that into fat for winter hibernation. And if we can just focus on that for a second, eating fresh fruit in your environment, and particularly the more temperate that climate is, not so much equatorial, but it will drive behaviour and it will make you eat more and more of that food. So it will turn it into fat for winter hibernation. It's an incredibly important survival method that we have in our bodies, which creates an addiction to sugar because we need it for survival for the long term. Unfortunately, sugar is no longer seasonally available off a tree. We can get fruit all year round, and certainly the byproduct of that refined sugar in one form or another is in our environment all the time, certainly in processed food. And once you understand that basic concept, then all of a sudden you can start making some personal choices. So I get criticised because I say to people, don't eat fruit. Well, that's not what I do say. What I do say is eat 1 to 2 pieces of fresh, local, seasonal fruit per day. And if you then understand that that's going to drive behaviour, then that's okay. So for me, if I have some berries, which is probably what the majority of fruit I eat, I'll tend to have it in the evening so that any craving that I may get associated with that by the morning's pretty well gone. So where does that leave us with the pillars of health? And again, I haven't given specific nutritional advice today because theoretically I'm not allowed to. But the pillars of health are your genetics, which you can't do much about, but you can try and affect them. How you communicate is critical. And I mean, I think get out there, and social media, I think, has got more benefits than it has got harms. And it clearly has its harms out there. How you manage stress is a personal thing. I don't have a magic answer. I know what I do. I share that stress. You know, I like to do that, and as a result of other people sharing that stress with us, we all help each other. How I sleep, well, again, I said I'm a bit hypocritical about that, but when you listen to your body, try and get an early night once a week at least. Exercise for me, well, again, mixed messages out there in the community. What is the right answer? Well, again, it's individualised. Get out there doing something, breathe the air, get your lungs moving, get your heart pumping. Varies from individual to individual. But nutrition, that's the big answer for me. The big answer is it's something you can do today, you can do tomorrow, you can keep doing it. Don't cut yourself up if you don't get it right. Think about the smoking. People take ages and ages to learn to stop smoking. Some people can go cold turkey. Some people can do a little bit here and there and start tweaking. But the first thing is understand what effect food has on your body. That's what sugar has, and I'm dwelling on that one today. Sugar in nature is meant to drive behaviour for our own survival. And if we actually think about that when you actually open up that packaged food, look at the sugar content, understand that it's going to be better for you if it's got a reduced sugar content. I'm not saying zero sugar, but I think I try personally to have zero added sugars in my life. So as a result of that, it is low in sugar, low in carbohydrate. And the carbohydrates I have are going to be having from my vegetables. Some carbohydrate comes in the meats. But in principle, lowering your sugar intake, lowering your refined carbohydrate, and part of another talk, if you guys invite me to come back, is to talk about the role of polyunsaturated oils in that whole equation of modern disease. We can do something about it as individuals. We can make those choices. I do believe you can choose health. You can't choose and control all the 6 pillars of health, but you can choose and do something about your nutrition for today. So, look, thanks for inviting me, guys, and I might come back another day, and I'm going to continue on with my morning cuppa here in Australia, and look forward to hearing from you. See you later. Thanks for everything. I should forget, if you want to listen more, support Belinda on Belinda Fetke No Fructose on Facebook. I'm back on Twitter on Fructose No. We're trying to make a difference. We're not the only ones trying to make a difference. There are lots of you out there. And each voice, one on top of each other, compounds this. We can make a difference. We can choose health if we want to. We can make a difference for our children and for us, for our grandchild. So welcome to our world. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.